another draft physics presentation and such. Draft science comments and such. Alright, anyway, off. Let's get to it. So draft science for whack packers. Yes, and somebody asked, what does that mean? Why do you do that? No point, really. I mean, that whole Twitter thing, when they're not even Twitter links. Yeah, no, hard to understand, people. Perfect Joker. Don't know what that means, so we'll just delete it. Check out the latest Fermi Lab about light bending. Why? I mean, you can't see any more than that. I mean, frankly, I didn't see the latest Fermi Lab that was at all interesting. So, I mean, I didn't see any title that indicated it was about light bending. What is wrong with this mouse? Irritating. Scientifically, frontal woman. There's lots of crap here, but I don't see anything. What is wrong with these mouses? My mouses are working. Irritating. Really irritating, sorry. Just keeps going the wrong way. Fermi Lab. Oh, there it was, I think. Nope. Sorry, I probably shouldn't do this now. Well, anyway, didn't see anything. I wish you could just leave a link to the video if you think it's worth watching, but you should say something about what the hell it says. I mean, I doubt it says anything interesting, frankly. Who's that guy? What the hell is this? See, there's Fermi Lab. A moment with Harry P. Ferguson III. That's about light bending. So, yeah, fuck you. I mean, sorry, but, you know, it's just, you gotta do better than this in comments. Just a waste of time to sit there and make vague references to something. Well, forget it. Make a point or fuck it, or, you know, it's just not worth the trouble. Alright, we all know basement burrow. So, oh, this is the Woat guy again. So, the cowboy is just procrastinating because he is scared to death you will bark at him when his results come in. So, again, you know, would just make up any kind of bullshit theories you want to make up. The guy has obviously a complicated life. You saw his basement, okay? Had a lot of stuff. Apparently, he had to move all that stuff outside to get rained on, so they could rewire his house and blah 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 and all this bullshit. So it's a story, okay? I mean, oh, man, you just you know, what is all this crap? I've asked other people to do the experiment. I mean, what's the big deal here? Do you think the results are going to be any different than what I've said they are? Do you really think so? Then you're really an idiot. We all know what the results will be. Yeah, so what do you think is actually going to happen? You think that there's some radio transmitter on Earth that can detect two signals coming at the same flat antenna, and it can pick up either one. It doesn't jam the signal. I mean, that's just basic radio, fucker. So you're an idiot. But you will blame him for being incompetent. Yeah, it's just useless tripe. Amazingly useless tripe. Alright, another stupid comment by Tara Woat. Draft science. Mainstream explanation is bankrupt because they don't know where the energy comes from. Now, it's just a fact, right? I mean, again, I didn't make up the truth. It's clear. There's no energy in something called bent space, right? There's absolutely nothing that pushes electrons and protons. There's no mechanism that causes them to move from one location. They're sitting there, and they essentially just magically or spookily just start moving. And you're saying it's some kind of geometry in the space that makes it happen. Some sort of bent thing of some kind or something. You don't have any explanation at all. You're just saying it happens. Imaginary fluid is flowing and the fluid pushes the thing along. Some sort of thing for which you can't tell me what it is. Conventional physics has no explanation. Do you know what conventional physics explanation is for where the energy comes from? And they have the same explanation for two magnets. Two magnets come in proximity to each other, and they have no explanation for where the energy comes from to move one end of the magnet and cause it to turn and do all this stuff. Nothing. They have no explanation. No rocket engines, no strings, no rubber bands, no mechanism whatsoever. Nothing. No energy source. Just a fact. Okay. Fact number 2, DraftScience, 2 minutes later. Mainstream explanation is wacky because they believe in zero-point energy. No, I pointed out how I don't know what a zero-point energy is. Okay, vacuum energy. So, again, I'm supposed to make that into something. I'm supposed to say, okay, let's just pretend it's magic energy. We're not going to call it something. It's not a photon. It's not anything. They love naming particles, right? They have all kinds of pi's and Zeitz and Zeitzoots and all kinds of names. How come they, glue on to what's the famous one? The God particle? They have all kinds of particle names. How come they can't name this force that's causing all these effects? This vacuum force. I mean, so you'll find that an acceptable physics explanation. A scientist comes up to you and says, well, it's 0 point. It's vacuum thing. The vacuum makes it. The nothing proofs it. That's an explanation for you? That's good enough? Yeah, I'm just saying, no, that's not good enough for me. So he thinks those two sentences are in contradiction. They're saying exactly the same thing. What the hell are you talking about? You talking about an ether? Then say you're atheist. Just be honest. DraftScience 5 minutes later. The energy is all around us. Yeah, well, that's never what I said. I said there's energy that we can exploit all around us. Just waiting for us to reach out and grab it. Yes, like the water falling out of the clouds. There's lots of places we can grab a kind of free energy, but something else did the work already. Some other force set it up so we can steal the potential. There's enough force to push entire galaxies around. Yeah, so there's nothing inconsistent here. I'm claiming a real force exists in the universe. They're claiming it's not a force, it's not a thing, it's not made of something. I'm claiming it's made of something. They're real particles called photons, in the case of photons. And that's the mechanism. Now, where's the inconsistency? Oh, that's right, there isn't any. Audience, if the force is strong enough to push a bowling ball or a fully loaded supertanker, why doesn't it squash a blown-up paper bag into pulp? So again, what does this mean? As pointed out, obviously the force only acts on something where there's enough of something getting blocked. That is, enough things moving to absorb enough force for it to affect something else. So we all know that that's how, gravity is only going to be realized with very massive objects. There's nothing inconsistent in my theory for that fact. I'm just pointing out that, well, if you really want to see the force in action, look at it when it's charged. Look at it when it's segregated. Then you'll see that the force isn't so weak. This is just such bullshit. All right, DraftScience. Stars in terror, like deer in the headlights, then recovers. I don't know what this. Stares in terror. Which I never did. You are brainwashed by religion. You are See, so he has to just keep repeating something. So clearly, I'm just saying, okay, you're basically defending the standard model. You think that's a rational and developed scientific theory, even though it has no mechanism for two of the most fundamental elemental actions in the universe, gravity and magnetism. No explanation for how the action happens. I mean, a description of what happens, but no description of how it happens. And yet they are claiming their model is great, when their model can't do that, when it can't model how it happens. Anyway, my favorite part, DS. There is no heat problem because every hit is kinetic. Well, if you don't understand that, then you're really stupid. You don't understand that on the subatomic level, There's nothing breaks into pieces. The things that are making heat don't get hot. Can you understand that? Like photons don't get hot. Electrons don't get hot. Just doesn't happen to them. They just move from one place to another, and it creates more force somewhere else and pressure. But they themselves can only move more, but they themselves don't get hot. You do understand? Their motion is what we consider to be heat. So it's like people on the street walking. If I put 1,000 people on the street walking, it's going to look like a lot's happening, but each individual human isn't burning to death. But if you look at it, it looks like a lot of motion, a lot of energy, a lot of heat. But the individual humans aren't getting hot. I mean, you people are just so fucking, this is just such shit as arguments. Again, you can't touch any of the questions I've asked, and you can't in any way debunk the videos I've produced. You're not doing it. I mean, this garbage doesn't in any way point out how I'm wrong. So how have you proven that they do have an explanation for energy, that their energy isn't spooky action, whatever 0-point energy is? Again, it's just basically saying nothing produces energy, vacuum energy. You think that makes putting those two words together makes sense to you? Well, it doesn't make any sense to me. All right, anyway, the Earth will be nice and toasty because it's absorbing all that energy. Well, it's clearly moving, and it's moving in different directions because of gravity. The stuff on the opposite side of the Earth, to me, is moving exactly the opposite direction than the stuff moving down here, right? My ass is pushing this way in the chair. The Chinaman's ass is pushing this way on the chair. Those competing actions meet in the center of the Earth, and that's why it's molten, dumbass. God, you people are so fucking stupid. All right, superior mind. I don't know why. Don't bother ever typing anything that looks like an equation. There's just no point. Well, anyway, if B doesn't equal A, then mainstream believes gravity is caused by 0-point energy, according to your points. And calling it 0-point makes sense how? Well, I'm calling it vacuum makes sense how? That's all you could have to say is what the hell does that mean? How can you derive energy from nothing? Isn't that just spooky action? And the energy goes away somewhere. We don't have to deal with any of the effects of it. Enough force to push galaxies around. So what do you think those forces don't exist or can't be summed? What's your point? Well, exactly. The galaxies move. Now, why don't you explain to me why they move? Why do the atoms, and more specifically the electrons, protons, and neutrons inside of the atoms of the galaxy, why do they move? What do you think's happening? You think they just move because somebody said, hey, move? What? Why do they move? Audience. Pathetic straw man. Nobody's actually that stupid. Nothing but childish and pathetic crap. Yes, it is pathetic. It's trollish. I don't even think a child would be this obstinate to being challenged to provide an explanation. I mean, when I was a kid and somebody said, you did something, or you did I'd defend myself. I wouldn't just sit there and do this over and over again. Whatever this crap is. So anyway, we've had our fill of Terra Woot. Oh, asshole. Alright, really good illustration of how the filters are altering the light using the 2+ polarized filter example. I remember that from school. Well, good. But clearly it's exactly, you remember from school, but apparently people just don't give a damn. Again, it's like Feynman saying light isn't a wave, and people just don't give a damn. That's what he said. Pure just made a video. We'll go watch some of it later. Saying light's a wave. He has no evidence of any waves. But anyway. So another one. Cato the Wiser. Wondering what your thoughts of this video. I mean his claim. I'm sure his demeanor will irritate you a bit. It's pretty short. But if you want to skip to the real meat, it starts around 5:15. Well, it better be 5:15 of the right link. Let's see. Now it's going to be that's the tag for this video at that time code. So that's not going to help me much. I mean, the video you were watching. So I have to jump. But anyway, yeah, I'll watch it. But I really don't like these blind links. I mean, you might just be. It's just a huge waste of time. I'm supposed to trust you?
How does alternating current even work if charges never...
We already did this guy. He's an idiot. Yeah. So I have to go to 5 minutes in a freaking 7-minute video. That's how bad it is. Ugh.
The field, which can't be the same as the flow of energy. According to pointing, the energy cannot flow in the same direction as the charge. Wait, what? Exactly.
Well, yeah, that's just so it's just a Maxwell gimmick, okay? The whole idea of they had to give them different directions to preserve the right-hand rule and all that kind of crap to make all the equations work. So, yeah, they make these two things go in opposite directions, but it's just stupid. It's just a gimmick for the purpose of doing math. It has nothing to do with reality. The reality is that the voltage is the only thing moving, and what you call current just means that there's more atoms involved. And that's it. There's pressure, and the pressure travels from atom to atom. And the more atoms that have to do that, that becomes more current. And if you run out of atoms in the conductor, then you're trying to shove more voltage, pressure through a wire that can't take it, and it melts. All right, but anyway. Yeah, so anyway, he's already been the dissident dumbass. Well, he's been the fake physiker of the week. Yeah, probably worthy of getting another award. Yeah, he's an idiot. An unresponsive idiot. He was supposed to respond to me, and he pussied out. So anyway, spam folder. Alright, Joseph T. Hi Gary, sorry I'm having trouble with communicating. Well, whatever. Can you comment on this other Gary's work regarding unification of physics? His name is Gary Lee, and he shows you can unify physics with quantum theory, with optimum theory. There's nothing to this. It's just nonsense. The idiot says his unification theory is energy over space. And he uses something called a cellular automaton and claims that that explains everything. It explains nothing. I mean, there's nothing to it, okay? I don't know why you're insulting me by telling me to go see something else like it's good. I already have a theory that works. I have a model that works, that unifies physics. Why the fuck do you think I'd be interested in finding some other piece of shit? And it's a piece of shit. I mean, here you are saying, oh yeah, this makes sense to you. It can't make any sense because it's fucking vacuous mush. So I'll play some of it, but it's vacuous mush. So he does this in Excel. All of these things are just blobs. They don't do anything interesting at all. And he calls this physics. It's not physics. It doesn't explain charge. He's explaining gravity by creating positive and negative planets. How the fuck could that possibly work? It's impossible. Planets aren't charged.
Speed of light is 10,000 times faster than the speed at which Earth orbits the sun.
Right, and just a minute ago you were telling us that he was saying how the gravity is always lagging behind because everything's moving away from the position it was in. But the amount of movement would be tiny over the period of time that it takes the speed of light to convey the force, so it would almost be irrelevant because no substantial position change would actually happen. And in the case of the sun and the earth, if the sun has a motion in absolute space, the earth has exactly the same motion, so it wouldn't make any difference. The earth is moving with the sun.
So by comparing the motion of these particles to the speed of the waves that emanate from them.
So again, waves in quantum foam, no explanation of where any of that crap comes from, what it's made of, what's the origin of it. Just so he just uses words like quantum foam. Well, how is this an explanation that unifies anything when you're relying on the existence of something called quantum foam? That's not a fundamental or foundational function.
We are able to extrapolate the gravitational equations.
Right, so he basically has like charges attracting, which makes no sense again. I mean, it just breaks all the basic rules. So, yeah, I'm not really that interested to go on with this. It's nothing. It's crap. All right, so I'll just read this crap that he types on my video. Theory, something I've never seen anything like. I don't know. Why would you expect to see something so undetailed and lacks any kind of connection to any real world result? I mean, he does a mock-up of the two-slit experiment. The pattern's nothing like the two-slit experiment. And it's obviously not like it. Glaringly not like it. A theory using cellular automatons to give you a superfluid. How do they do that? There's no explanation where your fluid comes from. It's mind-blowing. You're fucking retarded. He posted his ideas on Reddit, 4chan, and has a YouTube channel called the Optimum Institute. Yeah, with 6 videos on it. They're all fucking don't illustrate anything. The model is so pathetically crude, it doesn't explain anything. Let's see, any comments on the merits of his idea? Well, what's the idea exactly? It doesn't make any sense. Atoms aren't cellular automaton. We already know what they are, essentially. Electron, proton, neutrons. I mean, what are you talking about? Here's the main video. Yeah, that's what I'm playing. Garbage. And he posted about it on Reddit and apparently didn't find the right audience there. Is this legit? Legit is what? Like I said, I don't know how you saw anything insightful in it. It doesn't explain charge. Charge is the most important function in the universe. It just is. It's why there is magnetism. So forget it. Yeah, not useful. Check out the he goes into the Big Bang as if the Big Bang is an elemental function of the universe. There's no proof that the Big Bang even happened. Why do I need a model of that? I mean, to even try to model the Big Bang is being so presumptuous because you have so little evidence of what possibly happened. So there's more. Check out more of the same crappy videos. They're crappy videos. There's even a song. So anyway, forget it. A lot of people seem to be working on this idea now as well. I don't know what that. Where do you get that indication from? One minute you said no one's interested, and then you're saying a lot of people are working on it. But whatever. People are very unsatisfying to communicate with. Again, I already have a theory. My job is to tear down the existing naked emperor and replace it with the rational theory of reality, which I believe I've already discovered. So, I mean, you want me to debunk his theory? I can debunk it by just pointing out you're not talking elemental when you use terms like quantum gravity or quantum foam or Big Bang or, all of this crap. It's even these people have theories and they talk about, well, look, it even proves that light bends. And I say, well, then you're not proving the right thing, are you? Because there is no proof that light bends, idiot. They make their theory do things that you don't want it to do, frankly, because those things aren't right. If your theory is making gravitational waves, it's probably not a good theory, frankly. All right. So, delete. Fuck it. Not interested. All right. So, Piro, this ought to be funny. So, I didn't watch this, so it'll be just, we'll enjoy it together. We will speed it up, though, because Piro gets a little slow sometimes. I want to do 125, to be fair.
All right, I figured I would describe, my view on this physical question in on this topic of what's really going on in the double-slit experiment. And the way I would put it is
So we won't get to the real point. So we just saw the evasion. So we know we're not going to get to the real argument that's being made. Why don't you explain how wave theory doesn't fit the evidence? That is, water waves don't create two patterns. So why don't you explain the difference? Why there's two patterns, in the double-slit experiment. Water waves don't create images of the surfaces. We know that multiple slits create images. So he's not going to deal with the real questions that point out how it's not like waves. He's just going to try to focus on the part that is like waves. So again, he'll ignore that a single slit in waves, water waves, doesn't create any diffraction. He'll pretend it really does. That is, if you put diffraction in, you get diffraction out. But if you use regular calm waves, they just come out as regular calm waves out of the single slit, and there's no pattern.
Fact of the matter is that generally if you have that experiment and you pour light, you'd have a light bulb. And then maybe you'd have some shields and stuff, so just a little beam of the light went down some little corridor and hit those.
So we know we can't shield the light and make it straighter. So we already know that. We already know that surfaces automatically cause the divergence. So we can't confine light. It reacts to any confinement by spreading more. That's the rule.
Slits. In other words, it's not an ordinary idea to send one photon. One photon is weird. The scientists that say about this one photon that goes at a time, they will also tell you, if you ask them questions like, well, how long is the photon? How many wiggles of wave are there in the little photon packet? And
Well, we know that doesn't have anything to do with the two slits, in the sense that when you do the single photon, that is, you create a shield that only lets one photon per minute to get through it, that it will develop the pattern. And the patterns, no one's really theorizing that individual photons go to more than one place, that the rays break, because we could see the rays. If you were looking at it, you could see the light. So the light still has to be in long enough rays for a human eye to detect it. So it can't be doing that.
will tell you, oh, well, it's not really like that. You can't really say its length and stuff, because there's an abstraction there. The photon is the weird phenomenon.
All right, so there's an abstraction there. Well, it's not really an abstraction. It's either a fact or not a fact, that a photon is, in fact, more than one quanta, as I would argue. And I would further argue that the logical thing to do is to understand that the cannonballs aren't as long as the distance between the cannonballs. That is, cannonballs aren't a half mile long in, a 50 megahertz radio wave, or a 50 hertz radio wave. No, they'd be even longer in 50 hertz. That would be like 5 miles or something. Well, anyway, the ton itself isn't long. No, it's just the distance between the cannonballs. They're little quanta at a distance. That's it. No wave, no bullshit.
What's really going on as far as why we think there's a photon and it's spatially located, very good reason, don't get me wrong, is because
it always travels in straight lines from point A to point B. That's why there's a good reason. The good reason is we know the light source is usually projecting light in various directions, and that the light goes in straight lines to get to those directions, and we can put up shields that will essentially show us that fundamentally, that 99% of the light, you can shadow it. Light is a straight line kind of mechanism.
If you send it through there and you have a detector that detects just one photon at a time.
So again, you mean a detector where the target is. So again, your photographic film is much better because then you don't have to detect anything, you just let it develop the image.
You get one little speck. But I even put it wrong that way. Detects one photon at a time. No. If you have a screen with it's an array of detectors. Each little pixel of the detector, it's like it could get excited by electromagnetic wave that hits it.
I know, but look, Feynman already went over this, okay? So you can do it different ways. You can collect them with a detector and move the detector to the different locations and see how much light there is. Or you can just let it develop as a photograph on a film. It doesn't matter which way you do it. The results are always the same, is that you can see the photon form.
The reason we say there's a photon is because it seems possible that just one little speck get hit at a time. It's not like a whole wavefront and a whole row of them go off at once. In some cases.
No, in all cases, so it's not in some cases, there's absolutely no case where they all go off at once. So that's just a fact. It goes to one location. So again, just, it just plays with the truth here, implying that there's some other case. No, there's only one case. There's no case where you can make a photon arrive at more than one location at the same time. You can't make a photon do that. So it doesn't behave anything like a wave because it has no wave front.
Some cases, but in the general case, like I say, with a light bulb where there's multiple of these photons where light waves are going out, you just have, wave behavior. Absolutely wave behavior with refraction.
All right, right. But so the whole point of doing it with single photons is to point out how, no, this is the problem. You can't think of it as a bunch of waves of light, that is, lights of rays coming out as a front of like a radio signal, because it's not like that. First off, they're not all in phase, because it's hard to create a light source that creates all the light in phase, all the light at the same moment. Where we can electrically excite for radio signals, those photons, the low energy photons, the low frequency photons, we can pump them with a frequency and therefore produce zillions of photons, rays, at exactly the same time. We can't do that with light.
Fraction, these are all wave phenomena, terms from wave mechanics. Not quantum wave mechanics, just, water waves, sound waves, the waves that we were dealing with in the early days of science. Waves are just as natural as particles. They're just as intuitive.
So again, they're not as elemental, so that's the point being argued. Waves aren't elemental, they're in mediums. Always in mediums. Always. So except for the light example, all waves are in mediums. So this is just kind of nonsense again, to sit there and say, this is a perfectly natural conclusion, to draw this conclusion that photons, something not in the medium that we know of, are behaving just like something that in every other case was a medium. There's no wave without the medium. Water waves are not an elemental function like a particle. A particle is an elemental function. You say, okay, it can't be divided. It's a particle. All right. Some people will call an atom a particle, and we know that's a composite. But there's no confusion here when we're talking about photons and electrons. We're talking about things that aren't composites. They aren't complex.
That they exist, that there's something happening there. And some phenomena, appeared to be wave phenomena to begin with. Now, light, it wasn't necessarily as obvious, but in the lab it became obvious pretty.
So he's not saying anything here at all, right? I mean, there's no physics here. So now he's just pointing out somehow wave is obvious, when it's never obvious to me, never obvious that photons are doing this kind of shit through space. None of that was ever obvious. And the more I've learned, the more it's not obvious. And again, 2 years before Einstein died, he said, I've been studying photons for 50 years and I've learned nothing. I know nothing. I have no clue how they work.
Quickly, because, the fact that different wavelengths reflect different in glass, you wouldn't expect that. If a particle...
Yeah, why? Of course you would expect that. Of course you would expect that different frequencies would have a different consequence. So again, it's just more lies about what your expectations would be. Your expectation is that certainly if I shoot something at a frequency, that means that, say, even bullets, the first bullet will heat up the thing I hit. And so if I shoot the second bullet quickly, I can take advantage of the fact that it's already hot. And, you can cause more effect. So there's lots of circumstances, and clearly with tipping points and harmonics, that, where it becomes very important at what frequency you fire something. So frequency is very important. So sit there and say classical physics doesn't have any respect for harmonics and frequency, when classical physics explains why bridges fall down and why all kinds of stuff happens because of harmonics. So I mean, it's just such a, again, you can only term it as, well, what are you lying about the past? You lying that we did, they didn't know what tipping points were? They didn't see what earthquakes do? That earthquakes are quantum physics? No. Earthquakes are, again, constructive and destructive energy. And that's been around. And it doesn't require waves. It just requires frequencies.
Hit something, and some go in and some bounce off. The angle they bounce off would be the same, right? If you hit them with less power, less will go through.
Again, so you know how the electrons are hitting, the photons are hitting the electrons. So again, he's telling us we can only use this diagram, and photons have to bounce off at how we say they do. When again, I've pointed out that no, the whole point of the electron is that it's in tension with other electrons. There's no such thing as free electron. It's a misnomer. It's nonsense. They're always pressurized by other electrons and attracted by other protons. And that's just a fact. I mean, that's just surmisable from every experiment indicates electrons are always seeking balance. And they're always in some kind of tension.
No, but with a wave, they all go through partially and they're reflected partially. And how much they're bent depends on their wavelength.
So again, more nonsense. We have no example that that's what photons are doing, that half the photon misses and half the photon hits, and then half the, it misses this electron over here and it hits over here and it misses over there. No evidence that it spreads and does any of that crap. It hits one specific spot. It deals with one specific electron.
And that's the kind of phenomena you see with light. So
no, you don't see any of that nonsense.
So forget the slits for a second. Let's just say if you have a simple optical thing where there's a crystal, trying.
Okay, all solids essentially are some kind of crystal, but whatever.
Crystal. So like there's some gloss to the surface. That means some of the light bounces off and some of it goes through. And there's two detectors.
Individual photons either reflect or either don't get absorbed. So that's only two choices. No photon does both. So this is more of the horse shit. I mean, all the experiments indicate that's the truth of it. There's a percentage of photons. That's Feynman will tell you that. No photon does both.
And when you turn on the light shows up. You have a light that's brightness, 1 light power. Then each of those is going to be half that, because half the light gets bounced this way and half of it goes through the other.
Okay, so I know, but we know the individual photons don't do that. So all you're really saying is there's an arrangement to the matter, clearly. And so the shape of the atoms are clear. There's got to be a shape. There's electrons at one end and proton in the other in the middle somewhere, and there's a shape to it. And obviously if you're hitting something with a shape, well, the electron could be here, and the next electron could be here, and the next electron could be here. So there's a big difference between hitting this electron and going into this space and hitting the electron down here. That's different, and you'll get a different result. I mean, that shouldn't surprise anybody. The surfaces aren't solid surfaces. No, there's no substance that makes some sort of perfect, harmonious surface. Every surface has to have holes in it, so to speak. Deficits where the electron, it can't hit the highest electron. It has to hit some lower electron.
The other way. Now the weird thing is when you turn this way down, and in order to do this, you actually have to have a laser. So it brings in well, what is the laser really? But
so again, more nonsense. You don't have to have a laser to make the photons come very, very slowly, in terms of very irregularly. One photon in, very dim light. And the photodetector will show you that, no, I got hit by a whole photon. Whole photon, whole photon. So it doesn't matter how dim I make the light. What I receive as a dot will be just as strong as when the light's full on. The photons themselves don't get weaker.
let's just pretend you turn the regular light down until it has just a little bit enough energy so that this one photon is going off at a time. So it's going pink or it's going pink.
Well, again, the experiment that actually did that, the French guy, who we never get to see the results of it, but presumably with actual photographic film. So again, he wasn't turning the light way down. He put a substance in front of it that was quite opaque, but not completely opaque. And the result is that the substance had enough holes in it that a photon did get through now and then.
Yeah, that's the weird part. Now, why do you have this photon? Well, I would assume because the light is a wave-like phenomenon.
So again, I would assume. I mean, yes, that's the fundamental argument. Your assumptions, all right, and my contentions, and whether or not we have evidence to defend the arguments you're making. I'm arguing that your wave analogy is ludicrous without you claiming there to exist an ether or something for you this vibration to take place in. And that second, even if you think there is an ether, you still have to explain where the energy comes from for magnetism and gravity, photons that are created. Where does the energy come from?
So, when you have an electrical current in a radio tower, the light, the invisible, radio frequency, electromagnetic radiation.
Yes, the radiation, which was the same stuff that was in the wire. So again, the stuff is moving the speed of light. Now, in the wire, it moves a little bit slower than the speed of light because it has to go through all those electrons. But the stuff pushing the electrons is you can think of the electrons as the ping pong paddles, and you can think of the ping pong balls as the photons. And all it's doing is the photons are what's creating more pressure, and when they're pressurized, they eject. And so if you create enough pressure, it'll fly out of the antenna, and you can stream the extra ping pong balls out of the antenna, and you'll receive them on paddles somewhere else. The ping pong ball will hit. So it's always in the force is always in the form of ping pong balls. The matter is always in the form of a ping pong paddle.
Radiation, it goes off in a ripple, actually a spherical ripple.
So it doesn't do any of that. I mean, the radiation leaves with the shape of the antenna, okay, because the energy is going into the antenna, it's being pulsed in at a frequency, and all the atoms excrete some of the ping pong balls. But those are all individual rays of energy. Ping pong ball being shot by electron A. He'll shoot 5 ping pong balls at some frequency, and he'll shoot them, and he'll shoot them. They're all shooting the same exact ping pong balls at the same frequency, consistent with the pressure you put into the antenna. So the frequency you put in is the frequency you get out. So essentially you're just shoving ping pong balls in, and they're flying out of the antenna eventually.
From the tower. Now, why does it appear like, it's one photon at a time? It's a whole cloud of these photons, not like a regular wavefront.
So it is. It's a ray front. It's a bunch of rays, just like the light coming off the sun. I don't know how you come up with this crap. It's a bunch of bits of quanta, of momentum, flying off the object, and it hits our eye, and it goes through the lens and does all this bullshit and gets slowed down and blah, blah, blah. 40%, because it has to go through electrons again. Whenever it has to be communicated from electron to electron to electron, it ends up getting slowed down because the electrons move so much slower than the ping pong balls.
That's because of the quantization of energy that Planck discovered, which it's like quantization.
So again, this has nothing to do with any wave theory. Quanta and wave doesn't have anything to do with each other. They're not tied together in any way whatsoever.
With energy or space or mass or whatever, things are in these tiny little units. Ultimately, it's like space is in tiny little units, which...
Again, no one has any evidence at all that space has anything to do with any of this. Space is nothing. There's something and there's nothing. So he doesn't believe that. So again, he does believe in an ether. Maybe he's going to admit it in this video. Let's see what the title says. Let's see if he has anything. Latest transmission. There's no details. Clearly he believes in an ether. I mean, because that's the only way you can say space is quantized. You have to turn it into dominoes. But then again, you still haven't answered the question. Where's the energy come from?
This makes sense that a particle is the fabric of space, because there's these little, space is pixelated. It's not a classical.
So again, it isn't. There's no evidence. There's no experiment demonstrating it. There's no way to detect this mush in the universe. You can't wave something in it. You can't filter it out. You can't. It doesn't clump on anything. There's no evidence that there's any density to space. Space is a true vacuum. It's a true nothing. Okay, and the energy force is a something in little quanta bits, and the electron proton are obvious somethings, and all of this is, the rest of it is just horseshit. That's all there really is. There's electrons, protons, and quanta of force. That's all there is in the universe. The rest of it is composites. They're the functioning elements.
Pixel, it's stretchable and stuff in the sense of space and time distortion.
Yeah, so more nonsense. There's really no evidence that time and space are in any way connected. So you can't connect to nothing. Nothing is nothing. And time is obviously just a function. It's not a dimension. It's not a substance. It's not anything. It's just nonsensical. There's better explanations for time dilation than silly crap about thinking that somehow time is and space are flexible, mushy fabrics.
Can do weird things to it. So it's not as discrete as a rigid grid structure like the pixels on a video screen, but it is pixelated.
Says you. So what experiment demonstrates that space is pixelated? Show me the experiment that says that's true, decisively, with any kind of authority.
Sense that you're going to have like aliasing effects. Like if you only have 256 colors and you have a picture, you're going to have those jagged edges of breaking from where.
So we know that the aliasing problem has nothing to do with how many colors you have. I mean, obviously, if it's a color image, but the real problem is the number of pixels, the number of Planck quanta. How small is your resolution? And clearly, the resolution of the universe is so fine that we're not going to be able to see any of the quanta aliasing. But clearly the universe in its elemental form could be square geometry. Nothing necessarily is round.
Your gradient has to choose this color or the one next to it, and you get these jagged aliasing effects. And it would appear to me that the concept of
aliasing, so he calls it aliasing, I call it aliasing, but whatever.
A photon is some sort of an aliasing effect. It's a glitch that when you're at such low energy, when you look at the really.
So again, there's no such thing as this low energy photon. There's no such thing, in the sense that we're saying it's an amount of stuff. And obviously, if you cram the stuff in a shorter amount of time, yes, it looks like more energy than if you did the same amount over a bigger period of time or a bigger period of time. But it's not really more energy.
Low energy phenomena of it, because of the partitioning of subnanoscopic space.
Let's understand, the only thing that makes it more energy is proximity. All I have to do is move the ping pong. I have a ball bouncing back and forth at the speed of light. All I have to do is move the paddles closer to each other, and I've doubled the amount of energy. I mean, duh. But have I really doubled the amount of energy? No, I've changed the time equation, the time between impacts. And so it's sort of all I've done is prevented where it was going from it getting to where it was going. And because I changed where it's hitting something and where it's changing direction, because I changed that location, I changed it so it happens more often. And that means there's more interactions. So proximity creates more interactions, which causes energy, which causes force not to get where it's going. More. Okay? It spends more time trapped.
You get these aliasing effects where the wave is so weak it can just make one little jagged over here. normally a normal amount of light.
So again, just more nonsense. So he's just forgetting that all these experiments are supposedly been done with single photons. I haven't seen the interferometer done with single photons, but certainly the slit experiments have been done. And frankly, though, you know, a lot of them are done poorly. I mean, the Royal Institute one, they did a pretty good two-slit. I mean, they got a pretty good resolution pattern. But anyway, so we already know this is about single photons. We know this isn't about rays and bunches of light going through something. We know this is about what happens to a single photon. And the rational explanation is that the single photon hits something and gets deflected. That's the rational explanation, in my opinion.
The photons go out, half go that way, half go that way. There's wave fronts, cancellation, interference, all the regular wave stuff.
There's no interference. Again, it's just another silly word, especially the word destructive interference, because we know the photon isn't destroyed. We know the light quanta is not destroyed. The energy is not destroyed. So we know it's not really destructive interference, because we know it goes here or it goes there. It goes somewhere else. So again, it's just such, I mean, even their language is unscientific in that it's just inaccurate. And they do it all the time. So they use the term destructive interference when it's not really destructive. It changes its course. It changes where it goes. And then they use words like annihilation, you know, for their antiparticles when nothing gets annihilated really.
And so it looks like, you know, light is definitely waves. And the weird...
So again, he says it again. It looks like. Well, no, it doesn't look like it to me. And you know, I'd argue that anybody being fair to the evidence will recognize that the similarity is thin. It's only comparable to water waves in the two-slit experiment. Even that experiment, it isn't accurate because the photons are creating two patterns and the water waves don't. And then in single slit, there's no comparison. There's nothing similar. And then in multiple slits, there's nothing similar. So you're just denying the evidence. You're just mining it and saying there's one little piece of the evidence that matches, and therefore it seems like to me, because I'm only going to look at one experiment. I'm not going to look at the rest of the evidence.
The thing is just like, well, when you turn the power way down, so far down that you get that you're interacting with this quantized pixelization of all of our fundamental space-time and math.
So again, this has nothing to do with space-time. Sending one photon at a time is not a space-time issue. It's just horse shit.
The quantities, all the measurable quantities, that you get this weird effect.
No, you get the weird effect no matter how much light you shove through the slit. So again, that's just more nonsense.
The other thing, though, of course, is that particles are acting as waves. So that makes them look like waves.
So again, he says the particles as if he believes in particles, and then he's arguing that it's a wave. So again, it's just more nonsense. This is illogical. It's black, it's white. Oh, it's green, it's pink. It's just nonsense.
Though generally they look like particles, most of the time somehow there's a concentration of energy. And that seems to be just because when you have such a high frequency...
A concentration of energy where? What are you talking about? So again, you could argue that, yeah, that's what's happening in this single slit and the double slit with light. Even the multi-slit is that the light is all being pushed to one location, to certain locations. And certainly in the multiple slit, you see it so obviously in the sense that the entire image of the object ends up being transported just to these specific locations. So it's a bunch of nothing and then an image and then a bunch of nothing and then an image.
Frequency wave is so compact that it looks and acts like a particle.
So again, none of this looks like, acts like. That's only if you're looking to make it look that way. If you're honest to the evidence, it doesn't look that way. Because the evidence on this side, that is the single slit side, doesn't match. The evidence on this side, the multiple slit evidence, doesn't match. And then even the two slit evidence doesn't match. In the sense that, yeah, one of the patterns is similar, but there's another pattern, and why is it there? Because there's no wave theory explaining why it's there.
You know, and yet fundamentally, you're obviously looking at the same phenomenon. That billions of electrons look like waves, but with a really
So again, more nonsense. Now he's moving on to electrons. Billions of electrons look like waves. They don't have any frequency. They don't have any innate wavelength. It's all made up stuff because they've associated the word frequency with momentum, because it's true in photons that you'll cause more momentum for a period of a time. Okay, only for a period of time. So if you're segregating it to time intervals and measuring momentum based on a time interval, yes, frequency causes more momentum, higher frequency. But it doesn't mean that you can equate it as a power and say that now I'm going to say anything that has a velocity has a frequency. It's just nonsense.
short wavelengths, and one electron, you can evoke this little pattern that shows you that it also is rippling out in circles. But its interaction.
So more talk. I mean, what are you talking about? It's also rippling out in circles. Electrons aren't doing any of that. So it's just more nonsense. The electrons do the same thing the photon does. So if you do them one at a time, they do the same thing. They land in one location. They don't ripple out. They don't do any of this crap. There's no evidence of it.
With the space around it, causes it to have an effect, have this little anti-aliasing impact, and such that.
So again, that doesn't even make any sense. You can't anti-Alice. So I don't even know what he's talking about. This, you can't make the electrons smaller. You can't make their interactions smaller. So I don't even know what he's talking. What are you talking about?
Comes its normal behavior. But with lights, obviously, it's waves. There's a weird.
No, obviously it isn't obvious. The evidence isn't in any way hard or substantial or gigantic or substantive. It's a tiny piece of evidence, and you people just want to jump to this conclusion. And again, I'll just ask the obvious. I'll do a Ken Wheeler to you. Waves in what? We know that waves are in mediums. We know that water waves aren't waves that are going somewhere. We know it's just pressure that's moving. The pressure is the only thing moving, like a voltage. It's just a voltage moving, essentially. Yeah. So waves in what?
Weirdness when you turn the power down so much that you're impacting.
Again, you're not turning the power down. You're just reducing the number of cannonballs you're firing. It's kind of obvious that, yes, that's going to mean less impact. But it just points out that this isn't a phenomenon caused by cannonballs hitting off of cannonballs. It just eliminates the idea that cannonballs are causing scattering with each other or something. And it just makes it clear that whatever's happening, it's happening to single cannonballs, not ray fronts of cannonballs. There's no ray front of cannonballs that are causing the effect. It's happening to each individual cannonball.
The basic quantized nature of the medium and the energy, and so that's what remains to be explained. Whether light is a wave or not, how is it going through? I mean, a wave goes through that apparatus, hits the reflector. Some of it bounces, some of it goes through.
It's what apparatus? Some of it's reflected, some of it goes through. So again, more. What are you talking about? Whose theory is it that the light is being what you called reflected? The argument would be is that it's being scattered at specific angles. I would argue.
That's always the case. When you turn the power down, you have evidence that that's still going on, but just one little light flicks up here or here. Well, whatever. That's a different...
Whatever. So he says whatever. No, it's an important experiment in the sense that it proves that photons aren't interfering with each other. So just get to understand the point being made. Single photon somehow has to create two waves that interfere with each other and then land somewhere. That is pretty bizarre as a theory.
Phenomena from the fact that basic wave mechanics is going on, and that weirdness will have more to do.
So again, there's no basic wave mechanics because there's no basic medium for the waves to travel through. Every medium is different. Every medium has a different transmission speed. A rope carries a wave different than a rubber band, different than water, different than steel. So I mean, this is all just nonsense to say there's some sort of classic wave and then they're all the same. They're obviously not all the same. They move at different speeds and with different purity. I mean, different amounts of friction and loss.
with either the medium, the nature of the medium, as we explain why does it appear to be the case.
Right, okay, so there you get into the word medium, and you're almost done with this video. You got 30 seconds left, and now you're going to talk about mediums. Great.
Medium that it's in, or some dimensional idea where, in a higher dimensional space.
So again, there's no evidence of any other dimensions. This is all just baby talk in a sense. So we're just going to talk about imaginary snowmen, Frosty the Snowman, and we'll just make up fake cartoon characters to live with. There's absolutely not a shred of evidence that any other dimension than the 3 physical dimensions exist. It's just a fake word to talk about the existence of some other dimension. There's no evidence that any other dimension could even be formed, let alone that it exists. There's no reason to think it exists. There's no necessity for it to exist. It's all just baby talk, baby imaginations.
That ripple is actually, it's still local to itself. So, and that's why it appears coordinated.
It's still local to itself. So what does that mean? The ripple is local to itself. What does that mean? The pressure leaves one location, it travels to another location. It's gone. It's left its local. The fact that it travels consistently, is that what you were trying to say? But obviously some mediums are chunky, and the energy doesn't travel through them consistently, like a bad conductor. There's little bits that don't conduct properly, and they end up reflecting the energy in the wrong direction, creating heat.
That it could make a spec on this detector or a spec on this detector, but never both. So, yeah, I just figured I'd put that out before I go watch Game of Thrones.
Right. So before you waste your time doing something traditionally silly, indulge your brain in absolute mush. So, what can you say to this? I mean, it's such an immature coverage of the subject. Just no specifics. You got to nothing, none of the real root of the problem. Just fluffy. This is just fluffy bullshit. Terminology with no substance. Look, I have a picture of a wavy thing with fire in it and such, and it's pretty. Just ignores the subject. Pathetic. Pathetically bad. Alright, so that was disappointing. I mean, I didn't even think it would be that bad. So, he, met my negative expectations completely. Shit. So it's almost worth going back to this other guy. This other guy is even, probably less crazy than Piro. So we'll play a little more of this crap.
When I realized this, it broke all my intuitions about circuits, but here's what everything looked like when I put it all back together. If we zoom in on one of the wires a little, we've got a strong electric field inside moving the current along, and a little electric field outside. We also...
No, you have a voltage moving the current along. So this is just such crap. The voltage moves the current. Period. It's voltage moving like a wave of water pressure. There's too much water. Well, there's too much pressure, and it doesn't really, the big things don't move, so this almost makes it look like something big is moving. No, the big things are staying where they are. All they're doing is getting closer together or further apart. So at one end of a battery, the atoms, the electrons are closer together. That is, everything's compressed, and there's higher pressure. And at the other end of the battery, they're a little further apart, and there's less pressure. But that's all that changes, is pressure between electrons. The ping pong battles don't go anywhere. They just get closer together or they get further apart. Period. That's all you need to explain all this crap. You don't need anything more complicated than that. There's no fields inside the wire. There's just electrons moving a little bit.
Have a magnetic field inside and outside. Using the pointing vector, we get an energy flow toward the center of the wire. The energy comes from the field outside.
So yes, the energy comes from the field outside. Again, just more nonsense where you don't have any accounting for how any energy got there Where did the energy come from to come in from the outside? So obviously that's not what's happening. And it's just because they don't understand what charge is. And they don't understand that electrons are reflecting one force and protons are reflecting another force, proton force. And that the electrons don't reflect the proton force and the protons don't reflect the electron force. They divert it. And that's your right-hand rule.
At the wire. Wait, didn't you say earlier that the energy comes from the battery? Yeah, but it happens indirectly. Inside the battery, the electric field points the opposite way, but the magnetic...
Yeah, well, like I said, there's no opposite way. So, I mean, anybody can figure this out, right? I mean, this is obviously not right? I mean, any idiot can figure out. There's no way that something called pressure goes one way in the water hose and the water goes the opposite way, you know. I mean, everybody knows the two of them have to be tied together. And this is just, again, this is just because Maxwell separated electric from magnetic fields. It's all one field, and if you think of it in those terms, you don't need to do this because you don't need to worry about the right-hand rule then.
Field points the same way. If we look at the battery the same way we did the wire, the energy flows out of the battery and into the field. So the energy the wires and light bulb gain from the field is the same amount of energy that the battery loses to the field. The energy...
So, just more crap. Sorry. Obviously the battery produces all the motion in the wire, but it doesn't produce the energy in the field. The energy in the field is created by changing the exposure of the electrons versus the exposure of the protons. And as you reverse that, obviously you're going to change the direction that the electrons outside of the field will move. So anything outside the field that's an electron is going to be attracted if it's more proton, if it's showing more protons. If my hand is further away from my face, right, then I'm Mr. Hand. But if my hand is closer to my face, then I'm Mr. Face. You get it? That's sort of the point. And that's all that's happening. The wire, the battery is doing the opposite. It's making hand. The wire is transferring face, right? And so the field being created is face. And so the field created in the, anything sitting outside there is going to feel more face energy. Therefore, it's going to react and end up pushing more hand. Anyway.
Flow in this circuit looks like this. It's cray-cray. It doesn't even matter if it's AC or DC. With alternating current or AC, the current just...
Well, it's clearly obvious that in AC current, the electrons can't be going anywhere. So this whole theory that this has something to do with electrons going somewhere, is it doesn't work with AC. Because obviously the electrons are just going back and forth. They don't go anywhere. And yet you're getting just as much energy out of the system. So something else must be the real energy force thing must be made out of something else.
Moves back and forth because the electric field keeps switching direction. But so does the magnetic field. If this changes direction and so does this, the two effects cancel. The energy flow maintains its direction.
Well, obviously they don't cancel, so that's more nonsense, but whatever.
Even in an AC circuit, the energy flow is out of the source and into the devices.
I mean, clearly the whole point of many experiments are the two things don't cancel. It obviously, the field does go positive, and then it does go negative, and then it does go positive, and it does go negative, and that's why it's conveying, like in a transformer. That's why it's making electricity in the other wire, because they're obviously not canceling. So that's just bullshit terminology. Anyway, enough of this crap too. Disappointing crap everywhere. But anyway, enough of the video, I think. This is all very discouraging. So, yeah, so till the next time. Yeah, eventually I'll get back to making weekly, dumbass and faker videos, but just really just don't even have enough time to watch videos. I'm just busy. So until I'm less busy, you're stuck with these videos. So, yeah, that's enough, I think. So, till the next time and such.